Now, ever since the Mueller report flopped and word dropped of a new investigation into the origins of the Russia probe, Democrats and their media toadies have been desperate for some good news. And with new polling out, they think they've found it.
This Quinnipiac poll shows him down by 13 points to Joe Biden there.
In fact, the poll shows him trailing in head-to-head matchups with all the top Democratic hopefuls.
He's behind all the top-tier Democratic candidates by a significant amount.
Those polls that came out last night are trouble for him. He's getting absolutely blistered by everybody in the field.
I see a lot of signs of people trying to take back the country they love.
Now, before the Democrats self-combust with excitement, a historical reminder. At nearly the same time before the last election, the same Quinnipiac poll had Hillary Clinton beating Trump by 18 points, 50-32. Now, head-to-head national polls this early, they just tell us precious little. That's just a fact. During the 2016 election, Trump, what did he do? This is a much better way of looking at it. He promised peace and prosperity and higher wages. And voters, he's delivered on all fronts. Record low unemployment, more money in most Americans' pockets, and we haven't gotten mired down in some new thorny military conflict. All good stuff. In other words, Democrats might want to hold off buying their tickets to the Biden inaugural ball.
3 out of 4 Americans said their own personal financial situation was good or excellent. 7 out of 10 Americans said the U.S. economy was good or excellent. We have no history in modern times of defeating an incumbent president if people are feeling that good about the economy.
Susan Page of USA Today is something called a real reporter. Her point is accurate. Now, while Trump can run on this economy and an incredible record, Democrats still haven't really found a way to substantively challenge the president.
It is not settled at all that people know how to run against Donald Trump now. I mean, no one cracked that code 4 years ago, certainly. None of the Republicans did. Hillary Clinton did not. And even now, I mean, he hasn't been on the ballot yet.
And I think part of the reason Democrats are kind of in this flux mode right now is because they don't really have a governing strategy. And they certainly don't have a coherent agenda, not one that's going to raise your standard of living. And worse, what have they done with the power Americans entrusted to them in the last election, in the midterms? Well, they've harassed the president and tried to resurrect a 2-year investigation that put to rest the questions of Russian collusion or criminality. So I guess there's always, what, the Green New Deal? Good luck with that. So with no credible policy proposals, Democrats have decided to turn on the American people. So they're demonizing, they're boycotting, and they're trying to censor any and all voices that they find objectionable. You see that happening all over social media. Now, to silence the opposition, they've deployed their own political and cultural shock troops, like Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, who decided to read this letter from a constituent and thus entering it into the congressional record.
It is glaringly apparent that many who support the present administration are either racist, steeped in religious beliefs, ignorant, or, as my mother used to say, just plain dumb.
And of course, Hollywood needs to get involved.
These are the men that are voting on what goes on inside my uterus. This guy right here, this guy.
You gotta be on the right side of history, and the state of Georgia and those other states, they're wrong.
I would like to dedicate this to all the real journalists around the world. The media is not the enemy of the people. Demagoguery is the enemy of the people.
They literally have nothing to offer the American people except their own derision and hatred. But what if the unthinkable were to happen? What if Democrats did manage to retake the White House? Well, would their failed ideas work any better with a new figurehead? The failed policies of the Biden and Obama administration primed the country, don't forget, for a results-oriented leader like Trump. I mean, does anyone seriously believe that Joe Biden is the man who's, like, let's going to say, fix the border crisis?
You got to help grow the economy. And the president just cut that all off. It was working. This is a crisis created by Trump. It's a crisis created by the administration. And that's why, it keeps, this war's coming.
Only Trump has been willing to even recognize the real problem at the border, talk about the obscene loopholes in the system, rampant asylum fraud, the crime and the drugs allowed into the nation, even going to the mat with the threat of tariffs to try to stem the cross-border tide.
Mexico is right now doing more for the United States on illegal immigration and all of the problems of crime and other problems on the border than the Democrats. We can solve our problem on the border in 15 minutes if the Democrats would sit down, straighten out asylum, and get rid of the loopholes.
They're not even talking about those things. And right now, Democrats have the luxury of avoiding serious probing questions about how they would deal with other issues like the massive trade imbalance with Beijing. Now, back to Joe Biden, because despite dining out on his blue-collar appeal, he would be China's dream candidate, my friends, because there'd be no more tariffs, no more demands that China stop stealing our IP. Things would go back to the old days with American manufacturers and workers getting shafted.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man.
Well, this week, Biden, realizing how exposed he now is on this China issue, trotted out a new supposed get-tough position on China.
China poses real challenges to the United States and, some ways, a real threat to the United States. We should be rallying our friends to take on China's abusive practices around the world.
I mean, this man flips more than a short-order cook at IHOP. He has zero credibility. His party supports boycotts of states like Georgia for their tough anti-abortion stance, but they have no problem doing business in communist China, where 1 million Muslims are being kept in internment camps. Nice going, guys. And they claim to be for the little guy as they take billions from globalist menaces such as George Soros. They support open borders, and they lock arms with teachers' unions. Remember Barack Obama? He kind of once embraced choice in education. But now the Democrat Party has moved so far stage left that they're now against charter schools. The polling data that has the Democrats so giddy tonight doesn't reflect any of what I just talked about. It's a snapshot in time. And in the end, the choice will be simple for Americans heading to the polls. Trump's message will be, or should be, re-elect me so we can keep this economy humming and finally fix the problems that the old guard kept ignoring, like illegal immigration and prescription drug costs. Turning back would be the ultimate act of self-destruction for America. Democrats, meanwhile, will have a much harder case to make. They need to convince you that even if it means that you have to give back some of the money you made over the past 4 years, electing a Democrat is a moral necessity. Now, why? Well, because to them, Trump represents a racist America with an evil economic system that must be defeated and replaced at all costs. Trump supporters who wear MAGA hats will be shamed and attacked as this 2020 race reaches a fever pitch. They won't maybe call all Trump voters deplorables, but that's still what they think of you. Remember, Biden didn't always believe these things, but he now has to pretend to. And most voters, they can usually smell a phony a mile away. Now, other top contenders, such as Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, actually do believe a lot of this claptrap, which will be beautifully demonstrated in the upcoming debates. So if this election is framed as peace and prosperity versus identity politics and dressed-up socialism, this week's poll results will be remembered as fondly as maybe Michael Avenatti. And that's the angle. All right, joining me now with reaction is Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics, and John McLaughlin, Trump 2020 campaign pollster. Tom, let's start with you. How could the left be falling for the obviously premature and, I believe, incorrect polls again?
Well, because the left views Trump as they viewed him as unelectable the first time, and they view him as unelectable this time around. I mean, they believe that any one of their candidates can beat him. They believe that any positions they take will be acceptable to the American people. And so they read these numbers, even though they're 17 months away, and they're based on a national head-to-head matchup as opposed to, right, the states where it matters most, and think that they're in really good shape. And I think that really underestimates Trump's strength, as you pointed out in the angle, with the economy that's this good. If it stays this good through next year, he's going to be tough. I think it's going to be a very, very close election for sure.
And John, when you listen to the sheer elation in the voices and the delivery of so many of these media pundit Democrat types, I guess that's all they have to hold on to now. I mean, they can't really talk down the economy. It's pretty impossible to do that. Yeah. And Mueller was a flop. So they have to grab onto any strand that they can find now to find some optimism. But they do also point to some of the battleground state polls in recent weeks that also didn't look good for Trump. So how does the campaign respond to those?
Well, I tell you what, it's Groundhog Day again. I don't blame the president for being so cynical about these media polls, because Tom remembers he keeps a good collection of these polls on his website. You know how many electoral votes they gave us right before the election? 164. We got 304. Even on election day, the exit polls had us losing. Even Frank Luntz at 653, he's a good pollster, was texting out or tweeting out that we were going to lose. Instead, we beat them. Our polls said, Brad Parscale had our analytics, and that Sunday we went over them with Jared Kushner. Our polls had it a dead even race. We could win on the turnout. The president was going to 5 or 6 states a day. And we got the turnout, a historic record turnout of 139 million voters, and we were able to win because these media polls are skewed. They're biased. They're polls of adults. They randomly call people by their phone numbers. They're registered voters. They're not likely voters. The Rasmussen poll today had us 51%. The president had a 51% job approval with the likely voters.
Tom, I think that when we can always play the old sound bites from 2015 of all these people predicting that Trump wouldn't even be the nominee, let alone win the presidency. They were laughing him off. But at the same time, you do want to go into this election season, do you not, as the incumbent, with a very positive, sunny, optimistic message for the country. And I think sometimes the White House can get bogged down in the controversy of the day or the attack of the day and kind of go down a rabbit hole of negativity instead of saying, this is morning in America, and it's only going to get sunnier. That's where I think, if I could give any criticism of what they're doing now, that's what I think where they think they should take it, to the sunshine of tomorrow, not turning back the clock and going back to the failed stagnating wages of yesterday.
Yeah, people say Trump doesn't talk about the economy. He does talk about the economy. He tweets about it and talks about it all the time. The problem is he also tweets about 5 other things, and typically one of those 5 other things is what ends up making the headlines. I will say, though, the one thing where I think Trump needs to improve is healthcare is the #1 issue. It was in 2018. It still is right now. Healthcare is the #1 issue for voters. And Republicans and Trump don't really have a healthcare plan to take to the American people. Now, they're lowering prescription drug costs, and that's important and valuable. But meanwhile, on the other side, every one of the Democrats, all 24 of them, are endorsing some sort of health care plan, whether it's single payer or whatever. And so that is the #1 issue on the minds of voters right now, and I think it's going to be that way in 2020. And I think Trump has to have a plan to take to the American people to contrast with the Democrats.
All right, John, very quickly, Bernie Sanders gave another push for socialism today in a speech. Is that going to help your messaging in the campaign?
Well, he's trying to stave off Elizabeth Warren. There's one poll has her today where she's passing him for 2nd place. But I'll tell you what, you are right about it. It's about peace and prosperity. That's how Republican presidents get reelected. And this president has delivered on the economy, and he's delivered on keeping America stronger and safer. And Tom's right about health care. But the president said in his State of the Union he's going to cover pre-existing conditions, lower drug costs. But you know what? Our biggest enemy is not any one of these Democrats. It's the media. 90% of their coverage is negative, and these polls are skewed, and they're trying to sandbag us into believing that we can't win again.
Yeah. Guys, I think this is the brightest morning in America that we've had in this country for I don't even know how long. It is. I mean, he should walk into every room like he just hit the lotto. Okay, right. That's my view of this. Be optimistic and positive. Don't get stuck in these side issues that, frankly, don't matter to most people. Guys, thank you so much for your analysis.